Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sleepcrime. I'm really glad you're here tonight. I know many of you like to listen to these stories while you relax, unwind, or slowly drift off to sleep. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight, so feel free to leave a comment below. And if you enjoy spending your evenings here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more quiet true crime storytelling. Tonight, we'll spend some time with 6 real crime stories connected by one thing: ordinary moments that changed without warning, leaving questions that stayed long after the night was over. So make yourself comfortable, take a slow, deep breath, and whenever you're ready, let's begin. Story 1. June 28, 2007. Somewhere in Colorado, Paige Bergfeld is not at home. She's alone in her car instead, staying quiet, staying still, because she believes someone is looking for her. Not just watching, hunting. 3 hours pass like that. Then her phone lights up with a voicemail she never hears. Her daughter's voice. Panicked. Small. Asking where she is. A few days later, on July 1st, firefighters respond to a burning vehicle. It's Paige's car. The fire consumes what's inside. Paige is not there. That night, the story spreads far beyond Grand Junction. A mother of 3 has vanished. Local deputies call in help. Federal agents arrive. State investigators, volunteers, neighbors. People who don't know her still show up. Parking lots fill. Search teams fan out into fields and roadsides. There were people everywhere. It didn't feel organized yet, just urgent. For a brief window, the town moves as one body. Then quietly something shifts. Less than a week in, investigators uncover parts of Paige's life that hadn't been public. Not illegal exactly, but hidden. A second world she kept separate from her role as a mother and business owner. The reaction is fast and ugly. Whispers turn into statements. People say she wasn't who they thought, that the search is a waste, that maybe she chose this. The tone changes from concern to dismissal, almost overnight. You could hear it in how people talked. The words got shorter, colder. By then, most of the search effort fades away. Most, but not all. Paige's father doesn't stop. While others return to work in routine, he packs his life into a car and moves to Grand Junction. Not to wait, to look. He doesn't know yet that someone else is still active too. Someone focused on making sure the truth stays buried. Where is my girl? She's a grown woman, yes. A mother, 34 years old. But to him, she's still his daughter. Rewind a few days. Back to that Thursday, June 28th. Paige had plans. Good ones. She had reconnected with a man from her past, her high school sweetheart, Ron Beegler. They hadn't seen each other in years. 8 years, give or take. Long enough for life to rearrange everything. They meet for a picnic that afternoon. Nothing dramatic. Just conversation. Catching up. When they part, Paige tells him she'll call once she's home. She never does. Ron waits through that night. Then the next day. Then the next. He calls her cell phone again and again over the span of 3 days. No answer. No reply. Eventually, he tries her home number. A child picks up. Paige's 8-year-old daughter. Her voice is strained. She's upset. Not scared yet. Just angry that her mom hasn't come back. The kids have been with their nanny the entire time. Nobody really knows what's happening. That's when Ron stops hesitating. He contacts police. The call to Paige's father comes soon after. Frank Bergfeld is sitting down for coffee when his phone rings. A deputy sheriff introduces himself. Mesa County. You don't forget that kind of call. Even before they say much, you already know. Frank and his wife leave immediately. They drive to Grand Junction with one thought repeating. Something is wrong. Once there, detectives begin laying out Paige's life. It's full. Overfull. She runs 3 small businesses. Leads a support group for mothers. Raises 3 young children. From the outside, she looks stretched thin, but steady. Recently, she had even bought out her ex-husband's share of their 3-story home. A sign of stability, not collapse. Nothing suggests she planned to disappear. Still, rumors keep circulating. Media coverage brings speculation. Some suggest she walked away from her kids. Frank shuts that down every time it surfaces. If she's gone, he tells them, then someone did this. She would never leave her children. Then, on the second day of the investigation, a new call comes in. A woman driving home from work dials 911. And the case takes another turn. She doesn't realize it yet, But the woman on the roadside has just found what's left of Paige's car. A red Ford Focus, burned down to its frame. Frank arrives the following morning. By then, the area is sealed off. Investigators are already moving carefully around the wreckage, photographing, measuring, sifting through ash. It doesn't take long for them to agree on one thing. The fire didn't happen by accident. The damage starts at the driver's seat. That's where the flames were lit. Everything else followed. Then someone opens the glove compartment. Inside, untouched by the fire, is Paige's planner. The pages are stiff but readable. Until they reach the days just before she vanished. Those pages are gone. Torn out cleanly. That detail changes the direction of the case. It tells police what Frank has been saying since the beginning. Paige didn't leave on her own. Someone tried to erase her timeline. The local media pivots fast. Cameras that had been absent now crowd the scene. Frank stands near the blackened shell of the car, smoke still lingering in the air, and speaks anyway. He says he believes his daughter is alive. He doesn't quite make it to the end without his voice breaking. You could see him trying to hold it together, like he didn't want the moment to win. That afternoon, the heat is relentless. The temperature climbs past 100 degrees. Still, more than 200 people show up. Friends, neighbors, strangers. They fan out under the sun, scanning ground that feels endless. Over the next few days, the crowd grows. People drive in from across Colorado. The mesa fills with volunteers. For days into the search, another call comes in. A truck driver says he noticed something odd along Highway 50. Trash that didn't belong. One item in particular. A blank check. Paige's name printed across the top. The search shifts toward the highway. And then it spreads. Item after item appears in the brush. Over 90 personal belongings, scattered across 13 miles of road. It felt wrong seeing all of it laid out. Like pieces of someone's life shouldn't be there. Police catalog everything. A checkbook. Business cards. Her driver's license. One high-heeled shoe. Nothing random. Nothing torn or destroyed. Just placed. The pattern suggests intention. Paige may have been leaving a trail. Not to escape, but to be found. Among the items, one stands apart. A business card. An adult service. Models Incorporated. Investigators don't understand it at first. Why would she leave that behind? They start asking questions. Quiet ones. Friends hesitate, then open up. Her boyfriend says she did what she had to do after the divorce. To keep the house. To keep things stable for the kids. Someone mentions a massage parlor job. A side income. Then they search her laptop. That's when it stops being vague. Paige wasn't experimenting. She was running the operation. Models Incorporated wasn't just a name. She owned it. Managed it. Worked it alone. When that information reaches the press, everything changes again. The crowds thin out. The urgency fades. Week by week, fewer volunteers arrive. Eventually, the organized search ends altogether. 5 months pass. Nothing new is found beyond the roadside trail. Police are left staring at a problem with too many directions. Paige had dozens of clients. And too many suspects can stall a case just as easily as none at all. They start where procedure demands. Her ex-husband. The man who once threatened her and the children. But the call on record is old. Years old. And his location on the night she vanished is confirmed. 14 hours away. Philadelphia. Attention turns to her boyfriend. His repeated calls are traced. Denver. 4 hours from Grand Junction. He's cleared as well. Detectives work through the client list. 6 names carry criminal records. But one man stands out precisely because he doesn't. Lester Ralph Jones. A mechanic. A family man. Quiet history. No recent trouble. Until they look further back. Hotchkiss, Colorado. December 1996. A woman named Lisa Nance. A single mother. Much like Paige. She meets Lester, and the connection is fast. They marry within 6 months. At first, he's attentive. Funny. Good with her kids. Then the control begins. Phone records. Mail opened. Keys copied. Over time, hidden listening devices appear in the house. Lester wants to know everything. All the time. Lisa files for divorce. That's when things escalate. One night, she invites a new date to stay over. The next morning, she drives him to work before sunrise. On a long, empty stretch of road, she notices a vehicle behind them. She checks the mirror. It's Lester's truck. Gaining speed. No cell phones. No towns nearby. She presses the accelerator. Lester doesn't back off. He closes the distance and rams their car. Once. Then again. The vehicle spins. Leaves the road. Slams into a ditch. There's no warning. No chance to brace. Another impact slams into the car. Then another. This time from behind. The force pushes them deeper into the ditch, metal grinding against earth. Then a door. Lester's truck. Slamming shut. Lisa sees him in the side mirror as he walks toward them. Calm. Too calm. There's a gun in his hand. Her date panics. He shoves the passenger window down, grabs at Lisa's arm, tries to pull her out. But Lester is already there. He wedges the door open just enough to force his arm inside, yanking her toward him, smashing the gun against the glass. Lisa screams at the man beside her to run. To save himself, he manages to pull free. And then 2 explosions. So loud they steal the air from her lungs. From the corner of her vision, she sees his cap lift into the air. Spin once. Drop. Then nothing. For a moment, the world holds still. Lester drags Lisa from the wreck and throws her into his truck. As they pull away, she looks back through the windshield. The cap is still there. So is the blood. She doesn't stop talking after that. She pleads. Bargains. Says they can't leave him there. Says she'll do anything. Even promises to get back together if that's what he wants. Against every expectation, Lester pulls into a gas station. He lets her make one phone call. Just one. That kind of pause, it feels like a mistake. Like it shouldn't exist. Lisa doesn't hesitate. She calls the police. She begs the clerk to lock the doors. Officers arrive within minutes. Lester is arrested on the spot. The man who was shot survives. Both bullets barely miss anything vital. He lives. Lester spends one night in jail. That's it. Someone posts bail the next day. Weeks pass. A court date approaches. Lisa stays alert, waiting for him to reappear. He doesn't. Until a Monday evening. June 12th. She's alone in her house in Hotchkiss. The clock reads 7 in the evening when she steps out of the shower. Wrapped in a towel, she moves toward the kitchen. And freezes. There's a shape at the far end of the room. Standing in shadow. Not speaking. Not moving. Lisa doesn't scream. She knows she has to think. She suggests going out to eat. Somewhere public. Says it casually like it just occurred to her. Lester answers by grabbing her arm. He drags her outside, forces her into her own car, then gets behind the wheel. As the miles pass, denial becomes impossible. The last exit before the lake is coming up. Lisa remembers how she survived before. She tells him she still has feelings for him. Says it softly, carefully. It doesn't work. He lashes out. She endures it until he stops. Then she lunges toward him, suddenly, telling him she wants to prove it. Pulls back at the last second. Says the car is too small. Says they should find a motel instead. He hesitates. Just long enough. He believes her. Months later, after an interstate manhunt, Lester is arrested and charged with kidnapping. He serves time. A few years. Then he's released. And he disappears from Lisa's life for good. That history is why investigators take notice now. The parallels are hard to ignore. Both cases along Highway 50. Both victims taken using their own cars. Both incidents happening right as the women began dating again. Everything points toward Lester Ralph Jones. But Paige isn't found where Lisa says she should be. Not at the lake. Not nearby. Lisa chooses to stay anyway. She helps police build a profile. She answers every question. Some people don't leave because it's resolved. They stay because it isn't. For Frank, the realization settles in slowly. No new search teams are coming. The town has moved on. Law enforcement narrows its focus, and he's left on his own. He relocates to Grand Junction. Rents a small one-bedroom place. Keeps looking. He drains what's left of his retirement and posts a reward. $15,000. Anything for information. Anything at all. While Frank searches, detectives sit with Lisa again. She talks about the man she married. The man no one else saw. Lester played the part of devoted husband, while secretly seeing sex workers almost every day. Sometimes paying them with her money. Even after she chose not to press charges later on, the harassment continued. Then suddenly it stopped. A few years back, right around the time Paige started her business. After Lisa finishes speaking with investigators, she goes back to Oklahoma. The case stays behind. And this time, detectives look at everything again with one name centered in the frame. Less than a mile from where Paige's burned car was discovered, there's a large RV garage. Early on, cadaver dogs had been brought to the scene. They picked up a scent near the vehicle, then kept circling back to that same building. Over and over. At the time, it was written off. Too close to traffic. Too many people. Now it matters. That garage is where Lester works. Then there's the phone data. Investigators already knew Paige's last contact came from a prepaid phone, activated the very day she vanished. No history before that. No activity after. They start pulling security footage from every major store in town. Frame by frame. Hour by hour. And inside a Walmart, they spot him. Lester Jones. Buying the phone. Frank and detectives push hard. They want charges. They go to the district attorney with everything they have. The answer comes back cold. Without a body, the argument is simple. A defense attorney could say Paige chose to leave. That she met a wealthy client. That she's alive somewhere warm. Living quietly. Because of her hidden life, the story would be believable enough to stall a jury. No body. No case. That kind of answer doesn't end things. It just delays them. Frank doesn't accept it. He argues. He pleads. He's told these cases can take years. 10, 20, sometimes more. He tells them this doesn't end when they go home for dinner. For him, it doesn't end at all. 5 years pass. On the surface, nothing changes. But underneath, the case erodes. When investigators revisit old files, they realize pieces are missing. Security footage. Interview tapes. Personal items logged early on. Gone. No clear record of when they disappeared. Frank has nothing new either. He's walked the mesa more times than he can count. And eventually, he reaches the thought he's been avoiding. Maybe his daughter is gone. Then the weather shifts. After a series of heavy rainstorms outside Grand Junction, a hiker notices something lodged in a dry creek bed, about a mile east of where Paige's belongings were scattered years earlier. A human skull. It takes weeks to be sure. Dental records confirm it. It's Paige. With remains finally recovered, the district attorney changes course. This time, there's enough to move forward. But before trial, they go back to Lester. Police seize the vehicles belonging to him and his wife. They search for trace evidence. Anything left behind. But 5 years is a long time. Too long. Nothing usable turns up. Still, something unexpected happens. Lester is arrested. The trial is approved. Over the next several weeks, witness after witness takes the stand. Lisa faces Lester in court for the first time in nearly 20 years. She doesn't look at him long. Some rooms feel heavier than others. That courtroom was one of them. The defense doesn't try to prove Lester is innocent. Instead, they aim outward, casting doubt, questioning motives, undermining everyone else. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury can't agree. The trial ends without a verdict. A mistrial. Frank is disappointed, but not broken. The case made it further than it ever had. A retrial is scheduled, 6 months out, and there's a fear hanging in the background. If Lester walks free, who comes next? Because people like him don't stop. Everyone in that courtroom knows it. So prosecutors go back to the beginning, to what vanished early on. With help from the sheriff's office, they recover lost material. An interview that clears one suspect. Packaging tied to the prepaid phone. And finally footage. Security video showing Paige just before she's taken. When December arrives and the second trial begins, the defense is prepared. They target the lead investigator. They question her methods, her memory, her credibility. But the prosecution holds steady. Because now they have something they didn't before. Video evidence. Footage placing Lester at Paige's office on the night she disappeared. Outside the building. Waiting. It's Monday. Just after 9 in the evening. On the screen, there are only 2 vehicles. One is familiar. Paige's red Ford Focus. The other is a white Chevy Impala that keeps drifting through the lot, slow and deliberate. That car matters. It's registered to Lester's wife. The Impala rolls in 4 separate times. And each time it stops, Paige's phone rings. Every call traces back to the same prepaid phone. The one Lester bought. Then the 2 cars cross paths. And that's where the footage ends. The rest of the tape is gone. Lost to time, or mishandling, or something quieter than either. On its own, none of it is decisive. Together, it weighs heavily. Once again, the jury disappears to deliberate. 3 days pass. This time, they come back decided. They read the verdict aloud. Guilty. First-degree murder. The judge follows with the sentence. Life in prison for kidnapping and killing Paige. The room exhales. You can hear it. Chairs shift. Someone sobs quietly. It didn't feel loud. It felt settled. Frank doesn't react the way people expect. There's no visible release. No celebration. Later, he says it wasn't like winning at the last second. It didn't feel like triumph at all. People use the word closure. He hears it often. He never quite knows what it's supposed to mean. For Lisa, the verdict lands differently. Nearly 20 years of watching her surroundings. Of second-guessing every unfamiliar sound. Of carrying the weight of surviving when someone else didn't. And now, something finally loosens. Sometimes relief feels complicated. Like you're not sure you're allowed to have it. She admits she still struggles with that feeling. With being the one who lived. With the fear that lingered long after Lester was gone from her life. It didn't vanish all at once. It faded slowly. And maybe it never fully disappears. But it stopped controlling her days. Frank doesn't live long enough to feel anything resembling peace. He passes away in 2019. A father who buried his daughter first. Something no parent is meant to do. His life, though, was more than the search. Long before the case, he was there. Coaching her soccer team. Sitting through ballet lessons. Leading her Girl Scout troop. Showing up again and again. In the final years, he does one last thing for her. He makes sure the man responsible can never hurt anyone else. And he lays his daughter to rest. That kind of love doesn't end with a verdict. Paige's obituary describes her smile as radiant. So bright it made the sun jealous. It's a line people remember. Because it fits. Her story isn't unique. That's the harder truth. It's one thread in a much larger pattern of violence women face every day. Paige didn't enter sex work casually. She talked about wanting out. About feeling unsafe. And because of that part of her life, the system hesitated. The public pulled back. Justice came slowly. Almost a decade late. But Paige was never just a case. She was a mother. A friend. Someone who kept trying to build something better for the people she loved. For that, she deserves to be remembered fully. With dignity. And with care. Story 2. River Oaks liked to think of itself as sealed off from the rest of the world. Friday nights meant stadium lights, cheer routines, familiar faces in the stands. In 1981, no one stood around wondering who might be watching from the edges of that brightness. The idea felt unnecessary, almost rude to consider. Later, people would say there had been signs. Rumors mostly. Stories that changed shape every time they were repeated. Someone counting victims. Someone else saying the police knew more than they admitted. It didn't help that fear spread faster than facts, and front doors that had never been locked suddenly were. There was talk of a photograph. Just one image. Faces frozen in a moment meant to be harmless. The suggestion was that whoever was responsible kept returning to it, studying it, deciding who would be next. No proof anyone could point to. Just a detail that wouldn't go away. Gun shops noticed the change before anyone else did. Sales climbing. Conversations lowering in volume. At night, lights stayed on longer than usual. Numbers were whispered. 7, maybe 8, maybe more. Officials insisted there was nothing to worry about, while quietly asking residents to stay alert. It felt like two different towns at the same time. One pretending everything was normal, and one that didn't believe it anymore. Among the cheerleaders, frustration started to harden into resolve. 3 of them, tired of being told to wait, started asking questions on their own. Nothing dramatic. Just listening. Watching. What unsettled them wasn't what they found, but how close it all felt. Too close. Years later, people would argue about whether they helped or made things worse. That debate never really ended. Even decades on, the case stayed open in conversations, if not always on paper. That Friday night, the team was headed to Boswell, over in Fort Worth. Ray Stratton, Lisa Tickner, the rest of the squad, all already on the road. One cheerleader wasn't. Susan Brown was still at home. 16. Dressed. Waiting. She was supposed to be picked up by her friend Roxy. Roxy was late. Susan didn't have a license yet, so waiting was the only option. Her parents had gone out for dinner. The house was quiet in the way small-town houses often are. The phone rang. The kind mounted on the kitchen wall. Susan answered. Silence on the other end at first. Then a man asked if her parents were home. When she said no, the line went dead. It rang again almost immediately. This time it was her sister. Normal conversation. Familiar voice. Relief. While they were talking, Susan heard the front door open. In River Oaks, people didn't lock their doors. There hadn't been a reason to. Not before. She lowered the phone, told her sister to hold on, and stepped toward the entryway. A tall man stood there, shirtless, a red mask, his pants unzipped. Everything after that blurred together. Susan ran. He caught her, told her to stop crying. She stayed quiet, focusing on nothing but getting through the moment. Then a sound, faint, from the kitchen, the phone receiver. Her sister was still on the line. That changed everything. He pushed Susan away and ran. By the time she reached the window, all she could see were headlights pulling back into the dark. She told me later that the house felt empty in a way it never had before. Police arrived not long after. Questions were asked. But things that should have happened didn't. No hospital visit. No full examination. Susan remembered that clearly. It stayed with her. By Monday, she was back at school. No one had told the squad what had happened. All they knew was that Susan had missed the game, and they were upset. They said things they couldn't take back. Complaints about commitment, about responsibility. Eventually, the sponsor stepped in, told them to stop, said something bad had happened, and that was all they needed to know. They listened. Mostly. What followed wasn't anger anymore. It was distance, silence. And for Susan, that silence hurt more than the questions ever could have. Back then, people didn't know what to say, so they said nothing. Shame settled in fast. It was heavy, and it stayed. Susan didn't want it talked about, didn't want it passed from mouth to mouth. So life kept moving in small, ordinary ways. People worried about dances, schedules, where prom might be held that year. Everything else was pushed down. The police didn't linger on the case for long. With nothing concrete to work from, no clear suspect, the effort thinned out. Eventually, the message Susan heard was simple, even if it wasn't meant to sound that way. Watch the people around you. Pay attention. If something feels off, come back. Sexual assaults, they said, usually involve someone the victim knows. When Susan returned to cheerleading, the field didn't feel the same. Her body went through the motions, but her attention drifted. She scanned the stands over and over, faces blurring together. Smiles. Shadows. And then quietly the report started again. Another woman. Then another. No one openly connected them at first. Still, rumors moved faster than facts ever could. A junior coach, 35 years old. A former cheerleader, 19. Both attacked in their homes. Both receiving odd phone calls shortly before someone forced their way inside. Both describing a tall man. A red mask. At least 3 women in River Oaks had now been assaulted. One of them was a mother. She helped with Pee Wee League cheerleading. After her attack, she shut herself in. Locked doors. Windows closed. She didn't want her children walking alone anymore. What he took, she said later, wasn't something he could ever return. People stopped assuming their houses were safe. That change was visible. The attacks came close together, weeks apart. Enough to unsettle anyone paying attention. But little was shared publicly. Police chose not to make announcements. Life on the surface stayed calm. Graduations came and went. Seniors like Raytha and Lisa finished school and stepped into what they thought was the next chapter. December 7th, 1981. Lisa came home late that night, exhausted from work, not really thinking beyond getting some sleep. She carried that quiet teenage belief that bad things happened elsewhere. Not here. Not to her. Before bed, she checked on her mother. Ill, unable to speak or move. Sat up in the living room. Lisa said goodnight, went to her room, and fell asleep quickly. The door opened sometime after. A tall man stood there. Red mask. He pulled the covers back and grabbed her by the throat. In that instant, fear narrowed her thoughts to a single point. What happened next unfolded only a few steps away from her mother. When it was over, he shoved Lisa aside and left the room. She followed, unsteady, watching from the hallway as he casually removed his mask in the living room. Right in front of her mother. Lisa asked if she was okay. Her mother asked who the man was. Lisa said it was a friend. She told me later that lying felt like the only option she had in that moment. After she made sure her mother was safe, Lisa collapsed and called someone she trusted. Word spread quietly. Friends reached out, stunned, unsure what to say. One of them remembered speaking to Lisa afterward. Shock, sadness, anger. But at first, Susan didn't come to mind. The connection wasn't immediate. It didn't take long. The very next day, Roxy's sister was assaulted in her own home. She became the fifth known victim. Every single one of them tied, in some way, back to the same cheerleading circle. At that point, waiting didn't feel like an option anymore. Lisa and Susan started comparing notes themselves. Descriptions, details, the phone calls, the mask, the way he moved. Lisa went directly to the sisters, asking questions the police hadn't. The answers lined up too cleanly to ignore. Same build, similar voice, same kind of jeans. While they talked, Wesley Miller was there, Roxy's boyfriend. And as they searched for someone to compare the attacker to, his name landed in the room, not as an accusation at first, but as a reference point. Height, frame, familiarity. It was one of those moments where the room just went quiet. When the description reached Wesley's father, it stopped being abstract. Someone mentioned the arms, the build, casually at first. The father didn't hesitate. He called Wesley into the room, took hold of his arm, turned it slightly like he was checking the fit of a sleeve. So like this? No one answered right away. Then someone said yes. Wesley pulled his arm back hard and walked upstairs. No explanation. No words. That moment lingered. Even Roxy felt it. She asked quietly later if it could really be him. The answer came quickly, almost reflexively. No, of course not. Before anyone could sit with that discomfort for long, another report broke through. This time it happened in daylight. A public laundromat. People nearby. The man ran when he realized he'd been seen. That detail mattered. It meant he wasn't invisible anymore. Fear spread differently after that. Residents packed into a crime prevention meeting organized by the police, but it didn't stay on script. The room turned tense. Voices rose. People accused the department of staying quiet while women were being attacked, of minimizing, of hiding numbers. Someone shouted that this wasn't just a bad weekend. The police chief tried to slow things down. Said emotions were running the conversation. Said the public couldn't always be told everything. That explanation landed badly. You could tell people felt blindsided more than angry. For a while, River Oaks tightened in on itself. Doors locked. Lights stayed on. Firearm sales climbed. Neighbors checked in on each other. An unofficial curfew settled in without anyone formally agreeing to it. And then nothing. Weeks passed. No new attacks. Slowly, the tension loosened. Old habits crept back in. Around then, Raytha moved in with her childhood friend, Amy Moody. They were careful, at least at first. Locked doors. A little more alert than usual. One afternoon, Raytha stopped by Amy's parents' house. As she was leaving, Amy's father reminded her to stay cautious. Said the man who hurt her friends was still out there. Raytha brushed it off. Half joking. Half certain. She said he'd have to kill her first. Thursday evening. January 21st, 1982. Amy came home from work and pulled into the driveway beside Raytha's car. That's when she noticed the door. Wide open. She stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of it, then reached inside and flipped the light on. Blood covered the room. It was everywhere she looked. She ran back outside and grabbed her sister from next door. They returned together, holding a bat, stepping carefully, following a trail that led down the hallway, toward Raytha's room. What they found there didn't make sense to Amy at first. Her mind refused to accept it. She kept thinking help could still change things. She said later it felt like time had slowed down, not stopped, just slowed. Amy called the police. Then Raytha's family. Soon, the apartment complex was sealed off with tape. Neighbors gathered quietly. Parents arrived. No one spoke much. They just stood there, waiting, staring at a door that would never open the same way again. Before leaving the apartment, Raytha's father had one more door to walk through. One more person to tell. He didn't fall apart right away. That came later. In that moment, he stayed upright, almost rigid. What he wanted wasn't comfort. He wanted clarity. Who did this? And whether it was the same person who had been circling the cheerleaders for months. Raytha Stratton was 18. Her body was discovered that Thursday. The injuries told their own story. Dozens of stab wounds, far beyond what would have been necessary. She had grown up in River Oaks. Lived just across the Fort Worth line, close enough to still feel like home. People remembered her as outspoken. Strong-willed. Someone who didn't back down easily. That mattered. Those who knew her believed she fought. Not instinctively. Deliberately. Raytha didn't freeze when things turned against her. She pushed back. The case landed on a new desk after her death. Dennis Timmons, a detective from Fort Worth, stepped in. He hadn't lived through the long stretch of fear River Oaks had. He wasn't steeped in the masked man stories. He looked instead at what was right in front of him. The scene was brutal, excessive, personal. The damage wasn't random. At the time, there was no modern genetic testing to lean on. No quiet lab answers waiting weeks down the line. Just physical evidence. Timelines. People who might have seen something. Amy was there, but she was barely functioning. Shock had hollowed her out. Timmons made the decision to let her be, and spoke instead with others gathered nearby. It didn't take long for suspicion to drift toward the familiar place it often does. The boyfriend. Dale Kinson was the obvious starting point. He was close to Retha, present in her life. That alone was enough to raise eyebrows. Timmons looked at him carefully, asked questions, checked movements. But Dale lived under his parents' roof, rarely alone. The window when the attack occurred didn't match his movements. He had an alibi that held. He was ruled out. After that, Dale didn't retreat. He stayed involved. Along with Retha's sister, Rona, he began asking neighbors what they'd seen. And several people mentioned the same thing. A red truck, parked outside the apartment that afternoon. Dale could think of only one person who fit the physical description already circulating, and who drove a red truck. A defensive back from the football team, Wesley Miller. That name wasn't new to Retha's family. Weeks before the murder, Retha had mentioned it in passing, talking about the rapes, the rumors. She'd said the attacker was said to resemble someone named Wesley Miller. At the time, it sounded vague, uncertain, just another whisper. Now it wasn't vague anymore. Once the name surfaced again, it didn't really leave the room. Wesley had gone to school with Retha, with Susan, with Lisa. He was well-liked, easy to talk to, the kind of guy no one instinctively feared. That's what made it harder to accept. The investigation shifted sharply when Timmons focused in on him. The next day, he got a call from Roxy, Wesley's girlfriend. It had been her birthday the night before. When Wesley showed up at her place, he wasn't empty-handed. His jeans were soaked in blood. He said it came from football practice. An accident. Roxy didn't want to believe anything darker than that. But her sister had been attacked months earlier. She couldn't ignore the pattern forming around her. She gave the jeans to the detective. The timeline tightened. Retha arriving home from work. Amy discovering her. Wesley appearing at Roxy's house minutes later, only a few blocks away, wearing blood-stained clothes. Nothing overlapped incorrectly. It lined up. Soon after, Wesley Miller was charged with Retha Stratton's murder. 19 years old. Recently named best all-around senior at the same high school where Retha once cheered. That was when Susan finally saw it clearly. He matched the man she had seen. The build. The presence. He knew her schedule. Knew she would be home alone that night, because Roxy was supposed to pick her up. The picture everyone kept mentioning. It finally made sense. Cheerleader after cheerleader. Faces frozen together. Susan. Lisa. Roxy. And then Roxy's sister. Once you see the pattern, it's hard to believe no one noticed it sooner. When the lineup photos were laid out, something jumped out immediately. The cheerleaders were grouped along one side. Familiar faces. A pattern no one could pretend not to see anymore. Wesley denied the assaults. He kept his voice steady when he said it. But the evidence didn't waver. Blood taken from the crime scene matched what was found on his jeans. Prints collected after one of the earlier attacks lined up with his. Piece after piece settled into place. The man River Oaks had whispered about for so long finally had a name. People thought that would be the end of it, that once he was identified, the rest would move quickly. It didn't. Wesley was taken into custody and admitted to killing Retha. He entered a guilty plea, with multiple rape charges waiting, some involving girls who were still minors, and a violent murder already confessed to. Most assumed the outcome was obvious. Life behind bars. No debate. That wasn't how it unfolded. His defense team moved fast. Very fast. They reframed him. Not as a predator, but as a young man who made a terrible mistake. Someone with a future that shouldn't be erased by one night. They pushed the idea hard, and it stuck. What mattered most, though, was separation. The rape cases were peeled away from the murder charge. Carefully. Methodically. The jury would hear about Retha. Only Retha. Nothing else. It was strange watching the case shrink instead of grow. Victims didn't understand it. The confession was already there. Still, questions were ruled out. Connections were silenced. The jury wasn't allowed to know he was suspected in other assaults. Before the trial even began, the sentence ceiling dropped. Life was gone, replaced with 25 years. The number felt unreal to those who had lived through what he'd done. Inside the courtroom, the imbalance was obvious. The prosecution was boxed in, forced to argue with half a story. The defense had room to move, and they used it. There was something else in the room too, unspoken but present. Wesley was a football player. In Texas, that carries weight. It shouldn't, but it does. Jurors talked about his potential, about what he could have been, about chances. No one spent much time talking about Retha's. I remember thinking how uneven that sounded, even then. On October 21st, 1982, the verdict came back. Guilty. But the sentence stayed at 25 years. Later, when jurors learned about the other assaults they hadn't been told about, some of them broke down. At that point, Wesley still faced additional charges. 2 more rape cases. On paper, it looked like accountability might finally add up. But the sentences ran together. The rape conviction didn't extend his time. It simply overlapped with the murder sentence. No extra years. No added weight. Then came the parole hearings. Shock turned into disbelief when Wesley became eligible after serving only a fraction of his time. Less than a third. Survivors watched the calendar move faster than their own healing ever had. It felt like the system was rushing, when it shouldn't have been. Despite protests, letters, and repeated attempts to block his release, parole was granted. He was restricted from certain counties, but it didn't take long for history to repeat itself. After his release, another woman was attacked in Wichita Falls. She survived. Barely. She managed to get inside and lock the door. Her husband chased the man as he ran. The name came back into the news. Not as a warning this time. As confirmation. Laura didn't hesitate. She told her to grab the car keys. They moved without thinking much beyond that. The engine started, tires rolled, and fear filled the space between them. Laura said she couldn't look at him. Said she was too scared. Her husband told her not to. Just get the license plate. That was enough. After that, Wesley didn't disappear. He rotated. In and out. Prison, release, violation, back again. Sometimes it was a new offense. Sometimes it was refusal, declining treatment, skipping rehabilitation meant to keep others safe. Years passed that way. As the end of his sentence approached in 2006, the tone changed. This wasn't about reacting anymore. It was about time running out. Lisa, Susan, Rona, they weren't asking for punishment this time. They wanted classification. For the state to officially recognize Wesley as a sexually violent predator. A label that carried weight. One that meant lifetime supervision. Restrictions that wouldn't loosen with good behavior or time served. If they succeeded, he wouldn't disappear back into normal life. October 23, 2006. They sat in court again. Across from the same man they'd seen for decades. This time, it was his deposition. He denied knowing anything about the rapes. Then, unevenly, awkwardly, he tried something else. Acknowledged the leniency he'd been given. Offered an apology to Rona. It didn't land. He had decades to say those words. He hadn't. Not until it was required. It didn't sound like remorse. It sounded practiced. Rona had faced him more times than she could count. Hearings. Appeals. Reviews. She never saw regret until that moment, and even then it felt late. Too late to change anything. They knew the outcome wasn't guaranteed. The questions were asked plainly. What if the jury didn't agree? What if this was the end of the road? Whatever happened, everything was finally on record. Spoken aloud. No more silence. After Retha was killed, the 3 of them made a promise. Not quietly, not symbolically. They would keep showing up. They would make sure his history followed him, wherever he went. And they would make sure Retha wasn't reduced to a footnote. Lisa said she hoped Retha knew that her story didn't end where it was supposed to. That her name still mattered. Life kept moving around the fight. Lisa raised 3 children. Rona took a seat on the governing board of the Texas Civil Commitment Office. Susan turned toward forensic genealogy, helping give names back to cases that had gone cold. They didn't step away. They expanded. When the jury returned for the final phase, the 3 of them sat side by side, close enough to feel each other breathing. The decision came back in their favor. Wesley would remain under civil commitment for life. I remember the room feeling very still after that. It wasn't loud justice. It didn't erase anything that had happened. But it stopped what could still happen next. And for them, after decades of resistance, that mattered. Story 3. It starts with a phone call late in the evening. A man tells Philadelphia police he has just seen a woman pushed into a car. His voice is rushed. Not shouting. Just tight. He doesn't know her name. Only what he thinks he saw. Minutes pass. Then the footage comes in. One camera catches a car easing onto Coulter Street. Nothing dramatic. It turns the corner and keeps going. A short while later, a city bus rolls up and stops at a red light. From this distance, it's hard to tell who gets off, or if anyone does at all. The street looks quiet, almost empty. Then something moves. A shape steps into view. A young woman, alone, walking after missing the bus. She keeps a steady pace, like someone trying not to look stranded. She doesn't turn around. She doesn't see the man behind her. He closes the distance as she reaches the crossing. They speak briefly. No audio, just gestures. She turns toward him, but her feet keep drifting backward. There's a moment that looks almost polite, a handshake maybe, but his hand stays where it is. They slip out of frame together, past the corner. What's left behind is small and scattered. Glasses, shards from something broken, a phone lying where it fell. For a while, that's all investigators have. No clear view of what happens next. Just an empty sidewalk and unanswered space beyond the corner. Then they find another camera. This one faces Green Street. Detectives scroll back to just before the bus arrives, 9:39 in the evening, spoken aloud in the room. The same car appears again, slowing, pulling in close to the curb beneath the camera's eye. It waits. The bus enters the frame and stops. Normally, someone would appear at the top of the screen shortly after. 40 seconds, give or take. But this time, it doesn't follow that pattern. 16 seconds in, a dark figure comes up from the bottom of the image. He crosses the street deliberately. Same build. Same pace. Investigators don't debate it for long. Now the woman comes into view as well. The man hesitates, just briefly, then moves after her into the intersection. From this angle, there's no confusion about what happens next. He grabs her. She resists. Hard. Her body twists away, but he keeps pulling, dragging her along the sidewalk toward the waiting car. She stumbles, tries to break free. When they reach the vehicle, he forces her inside. There's a moment, right at the edge of the frame, where it looks like she might slip away. She doesn't, but she does something else. Later, going through the footage frame by frame, police notice the phone in her hand as she's being pulled. Then they see it fall. It hits the ground and stays there. That small act gives them a name. She is identified as Carlisha Freeland Gaither, 22 years old, a nursing aide, someone who was supposed to be home later that night. That drop, it's easy to miss unless you're looking for it. But once you see it, you don't forget where it lands. As detectives keep watching, another detail surfaces. Near the top of the screen, a second person moves through the street. He isn't involved in the struggle. He's passing through. This is the man who made the call. His name is Dwayne Fletcher. He tells police he noticed Carlisha earlier that night. Even before anything happened, she seemed uneasy. He had been walking along Green Street toward a nearby convenience store, following the same path. About a minute later, he heard a sound. Sharp. Sudden. He turned back, heading down Coulter Street. That's when he saw her being shoved into the parked car. He ran toward it but stopped short, ducking away, convinced the noise he heard was a gunshot. The car sped off before he could reach it. Later, police explained there was no gun. No shell casings. The sound was likely glass, a window breaking as she fought to get out. The realization hits him hard. He keeps thinking about the distance. The seconds. What he might have done differently. He kept replaying the timing out loud. Not arguing. Just counting it. The next day arrives quietly. Monday, November 3rd. Roughly 12 hours have passed since Carlisha was taken. Investigators move fast. Family. Friends. Co-workers. Everyone is interviewed. Nothing surfaces. No disputes. No obvious threats. No clear direction. Her relatives don't wait. They print posters. Hand out flyers. Walk the neighborhood with her face in their hands. Soon the footage is everywhere. News broadcasts loop the images again and again. The hope is simple, that someone recognizes the car, the man, or the moment before everything changed. The footage never sharpens enough. Faces blur. Edges smear. Whoever the man is, the cameras don't give him up. That's the problem, because investigators should already know him. A month earlier, another young woman had been taken. She survived. She escaped. And the man she named was already on police radar. Delvin Barnes, suspected in more than one violent abduction. Whispered about as something worse, something that hadn't yet been proven. When the teenage girl got away, she told detectives things that stayed with them. Barnes had shown her photographs. Other women. He talked about holding them for 2 days. About what came after. By the time officers tried to serve an arrest warrant, he had vanished. Now the clock is running again. And it's running toward Carlicia. Tuesday, November 4th. More than a day has passed. A reward is announced. Roughly $47,000. The phones finally light up. Tips come in fast, overlapping, most of them useless. One call doesn't fit. A woman in Maryland says she's found something strange on her land. She lives in Havre de Grace, over 70 miles from where Carlicia was taken. Agents don't expect much. Then they arrive. Broken glass. Snack wrappers. A cut zip tie. A store receipt. An earring. Everything sealed together inside a plastic bag. Too neat. Too deliberate. Like someone wanted it noticed. What pulls them in closer is the receipt. It traces back to a grocery store in Philadelphia. Time stamped early afternoon. Just hours before the abduction. They pull the store's footage. A man walks in around 1:43 in the afternoon. Dark hoodie. Black hat. His clothes match the attacker's outline. At one point, he raises his hand toward his face, as if he knows exactly where the camera is. But again, no clear view. No face. When the images go public, hope fades quickly. It's frustrating footage. You feel like you're almost there, but never quite. Then comes worse news. Back at the Maryland property, an agent notices tire tracks. They don't turn back. They lead straight into the water. Divers are sent out immediately. The Susquehanna River is searched through the night. Slow, cold, silent work. By 9:40 in the evening on November 4th, nearly 2 full days have passed since Carlicia was taken. Investigators begin preparing themselves for an outcome they don't want to say out loud. At that same moment, she is still alive. More than 30 miles away, Carlicia is locked inside the trunk of a moving car. She can feel every turn, every change in speed. She doesn't know where she's being taken. She doesn't know if anyone is still looking. But she hasn't stopped trying to leave pieces of herself behind. Her story loops back to the night it started. November 2nd, just after 9:30. She's walking home from a birthday gathering, heading toward a bus stop. For a moment, she relaxes, tells herself the fear was unnecessary. Then a man approaches. He asks for directions. His tone is casual, normal. She answers. He reaches out his hand. When he doesn't let go, the fear hits all at once. She fights. It doesn't change the outcome. He drags her to the car anyway. In the chaos, she manages one small act, something she hopes someone will notice later. Inside the vehicle, he moves to the front seat. His back turned. Carlicia lunges for another door. It won't open. A child lock. The engine starts. The city begins to slide past. They head south, onto Interstate 95. Less than half an hour later, the car leaves the highway and stops somewhere remote. What happens there is violent and prolonged. Investigators later describe it without detail, but with weight. The assault does not end quickly. By the next day, Tuesday, November 3rd, Carlicia is being transported again, locked in the trunk. The car slows on uneven ground. When the trunk opens, she sees a field. No houses. No traffic. Just darkness. The man plans to sleep nearby. Close enough to keep watch. She lies awake. Cold. Exhausted. Her thoughts circle places she doesn't want to go. For a moment, she considers letting go entirely. Then she thinks of her grandmother. The woman who raised her when no one else could. The one person she knows would never stop looking. The idea of that grief pulls her back from the edge. Carlicia decides she will survive. She holds on to that connection. Not hope exactly, but something solid enough to stay. Just before dawn, around 5:45 in the morning, the man finally wakes. He tells Carlicia to clean out the trash from the car. She steps out into an open field, holding empty wrappers, standing with nothing around her but space. The thought of running hits her immediately. Hard. Then it passes. Too far. Too exposed. While she gathers the trash, another idea forms. She slips more into the bag than he asked for. Shards of broken glass from the car floor. The cut zip ties. One of her earrings. She ties it all together and leaves it where someone might actually find it. A short time later, 6 in the morning, the car pulls into the parking lot of a PNC bank. He asks for her debit card. She hands it over without arguing. She already understands what this means. 2 days since she was taken, and now a signal. Not long after, the FBI is alerted. Her card has been used. Just a few miles from where the trash bag was recovered. Agents pull the footage from the automated teller. The same outline appears again. Dark clothes, familiar posture, still no face. But the footage confirms something critical. She had to be alive. She had to give him the access code. That detail mattered more than the image. It changed the tone in the room. Investigators start thinking outward. If he used her card once, maybe he spent more nearby. They begin close a convenience store less than a mile away. This time, the camera doesn't betray them. The man walks clearly into frame. His face visible, ordinary, forgettable. Exactly the kind of face that disappears in crowds. The image goes national by the end of the day. Every channel, every bulletin, still no name. And inside the trunk, after more than 48 hours, Carlisha feels time stretching thin. Hope doesn't vanish all at once. It drains. By the second full day, something shifts. She's no longer restrained. The back seat is folded down while she's kept in the trunk. When he focuses on driving, she speaks to him. Carefully, calmly, drawing on her experience from hospital work, patients who were volatile, unpredictable. She listens. She mirrors. She doesn't challenge. Gradually, he opens up. He talks about having a daughter. Then he starts talking about other women. Details. Too many. Too specific. That's when she understands who she's dealing with. November 5th. 3 days after the abduction. In Richmond, Virginia, someone watching the news recognizes the man. Authorities finally put a name to the face. Delvin Barnes, 37 years old. Previously tied to another kidnapping. A long record of violence. There's no relief in that realization. Only urgency. Teams move immediately to Richmond. His home. His past. Family members. Former partners. Neighbors. One ex-wife confirms the car. A gray Ford Taurus. From there, a dealership. And an unexpected break. The vehicle had been fitted with a tracking device. When the signal comes in, it points north. Maryland. A town called Jessup. Units flood the area. At the same time, Barnes is making plans of his own. He's parked at a strip mall, intending to take another car. Around 5:15 in the evening, an ATF agent named David Cheplak is nearby. He heads toward the lot with the vehicle description in hand. From a distance, he sees it. A garbage bag taped over a shattered window. No movement inside. They're told to wait for backup. Seconds stretch. Then everything accelerates. Agents rush the car together. Barnes is still in the driver's seat when weapons come up and commands are shouted. He's taken into custody without resistance. He looks confused, completely unaware of how close they were. It happened fast. Faster than it felt like it should. Once the scene stabilizes, agents move toward the back. The rear window is blocked by the plastic bag. They reach for the door. For several seconds, no one is sure. The rear of the car is still sealed. A plastic bag blocks the window. From the outside, there's no movement, no sound anyone can place with certainty. Then the door opens. What follows is confusion layered with disbelief. An agent's phone is recording nearby, capturing voices that don't sound prepared for what they're seeing. "Oh my God! She's here. What's your name?" Her answer comes quickly. Clear. Steady considering everything. Carlisha Freeland. In that moment, it's over. She is the one they were looking for. Alive. The man who took her is in custody. Later, she tries to explain what it felt like when she realized she was being rescued. The words come slowly. Not dramatic. Just relief. Peace. Safety. The certainty that she would go home. She's taken to a hospital, and not long after, she sees her grandmother again. The reunion doesn't need explanation. It's overwhelming in a way that leaves no room for cameras or commentary. When she walked into the room, everything else just stopped. There wasn't space for anything but that. With Carlisha safe, news spreads quickly. And somewhere else in the city, Dwayne Fletcher finally exhales. For days, he carried the weight of that night, the seconds he replayed, the distance he couldn't close. He blamed himself for what he didn't do. Others didn't see it that way. City Council recognizes him publicly, calls him a hero, credits his call with saving a life. When Carlisha learns what he did, how close he was, she wants to speak to him. It takes time. Nearly a year passes before they finally talk on the phone. The conversation doesn't follow a script. It doesn't need to. It didn't feel real at first. Just really good to finally hear her voice. Fletcher doesn't dwell on praise. He says he did what anyone should. But her rescue changes something for him. Today, he runs a boxing gym in North Philadelphia. He teaches women and girls how to protect themselves. He says it's about making sure this story doesn't repeat. As for Delvin Barnes, 3 days after the abduction, federal agents interrogate him. He confesses to taking her, to the assaults, to everything. He pleads guilty to federal kidnapping and receives a 35-year prison sentence. For investigators, it marks the end of a violent stretch that could have gone on much longer. For Carlisha, the ending is more complicated. She says she still has nightmares, still feels fear in quiet places. Healing isn't linear. Some days are heavier than others, but she takes them one at a time. Today, she's a mother, and when she watches her son, something settles. He reminds her what life is supposed to feel like. Light, unburdened, open. Looking back at what happened in 2014, she says something that stops people short. She's glad it was her. Not because it was easy, but because she believes she could survive it, and someone else might not have. She talks about it like a responsibility she didn't choose, but carried anyway. She's still here, still telling her story, hoping it reaches someone who needs to hear it. And maybe that's the last thing this case leaves behind. Not closure, but proof that survival can exist even where it shouldn't. Story 4. The first thing people hear is the certainty. Not an argument, not a discussion, just declarations about power, about hierarchy, about who matters and who doesn't. Men and women divided into ranks. Negotiation framed as weakness. Anger framed as clarity. These voices didn't come from nowhere. They found each other online, repeating the same ideas until they stopped sounding extreme. Alpha, real alpha, true alpha. Labels stacked on top of labels until meaning thins out. What starts as posturing turns into instruction. Some of it is loud, some of it almost casual, and threaded through it is permission to humiliate, to intimidate, to strike. When you hear it clipped like that, it sounds rehearsed, like they've said it many times before. Researchers begin to notice a pattern. Young men echoing the same phrases, the same resentments. They trace it through overlapping belief systems with strange names, built to feel exclusive. The red pill, and then something darker, positioned as the final truth. Black pill. It's described as going further than despair. A worldview where nothing can improve, nothing can be fixed, and blame has already been assigned. Women become the explanation for everything that hurts. When a man is arrested for attacking women on the street, he tells police he's taken the black pill. Not metaphorically, as an identity. Online, the language sharpens. A mass killing in Toronto leaves 25 people dead. In private forums, the attacker is praised. Not for what he did, but for who he targeted. Revenge, they say. As if rejection justifies bloodshed. Most followers stay anonymous. One man doesn't. He steps forward, openly, and claims the ideology as his own. Calls it a tribe. Talks about loyalty like it's currency. He isn't just collecting views. He's testing devotion. That's the part that feels different. When belief turns into something people are willing to act on. He describes himself as a true believer. And on December 27, 2021, the ideas stop being theoretical. Across the city of Denver, he moves from place to place, armed, deliberate. The targets are not random. The motive is embedded in everything he's posted, everything he's said. One woman survives an encounter with him. Not because it was meant to end that way, but because she refuses to let it. Her presence interrupts the narrative he's been building. Later, she says she had been thinking about ending her own life. Instead, he chose to shoot her. She lived. Sometimes survival isn't planned. It just happens in the middle of chaos. As investigators try to understand how this ideology spreads, they rewind further. Before Black Pill, before forums and manifestos, the word incel starts circulating widely around 2015. Short for involuntary celibate. At first, it describes isolation, loneliness. Then resentment creeps in. And eventually, blame settles on women as a group. Over time, incel culture becomes half joke, half threat. Memes masking something heavier. That's where the red pill gains traction. The red pill claims society is structured to favor women and punish men. That emotional pain isn't random, it's engineered. Statistics are cherry-picked. Mental health struggles are reframed as proof of betrayal. Young men report years without relationships, high rates of depression, anxiety, isolation, and instead of support, they're handed an explanation that points outward. It's easier to carry anger when someone tells you exactly where to aim it. The language borrows from popular culture, from a movie about illusion and awakening. Online, the metaphor twists. Blue pill means ignorance, red pill means truth. And once someone accepts that framing, disagreement becomes impossible. According to this belief, love isn't real. Respect is a lie. Relationships are transactions based on dominance and status. The ideas don't stay confined to forums. They show up in classrooms. Teachers describe boys repeating sexual insults without hesitation. Comments about appearance, about worth, about access. A pregnant teacher is told she couldn't possibly be carrying a child because no one would want her. Another is mocked while asking students to stop a minor disruption. Creative writing assignments turn hostile. You can hear where it comes from. The phrasing gives it away. Public figures amplify it. Some are proud of the label. They say misogyny isn't an accusation, it's honesty. They redefine fidelity, redefine love, redefine harm. By the time violence occurs, the groundwork has already been laid. Not in one place. Not by one person. Just a steady drip of certainty, telling people who to blame and why they deserve it. It starts small again. A sentence tossed out like it's obvious. If she speaks to another man, that's betrayal. A wife described not as a partner, but as owned. That tone has a source. It almost always does. One name keeps surfacing in these spaces: Andrew Tate. For a time, his reach was enormous. Searches spiked. Clips traveled faster than context. Even after arrests and investigations, the messaging never really stopped. Authorities allege he controlled an organized operation that drew women to Romania, where they were later exploited. The accusations are serious. So are the stories that followed. When allegations line up like that, it stops feeling theoretical. One woman recalls a private moment that turned without warning. A comment, then a decision made for her. Force replaces conversation. Later, he describes the encounter casually, as if harm were simply part of the script. As if this is how intimacy is supposed to sound. The red pill ideology already strips empathy down to nothing. But it doesn't end there. Something colder forms underneath it. Less performative. More absolute. The black pill rejects improvement altogether. It insists the system is broken beyond repair. That men are sentenced to isolation. That women exist only to deny them. Morality doesn't matter here. Only power does. And when nothing else feels available, violence is reframed as the last language left. A young man records himself. He says he's 22. He says he's never had sex. He doesn't ask why. He promises punishment instead. That video wasn't ignored. Police later confirmed the motive behind a mass shooting without much searching. The words were already online. The resentment spelled out in advance. At the University of California, Santa Barbara, grief settles in fast. 6 people are killed. 7 more are wounded. One woman is walking with friends when the gunfire begins. Parents speak afterwards stunned. They talk about futures that no longer exist. About a daughter who had more to give than this story will ever show. There's no language that really fits moments like that. The attacker's name becomes impossible to separate from the ideology. Elliot Rodger. His writings circulate. His phrases are quoted, sometimes reverently, in the darkest forums. For those fully immersed in black pill thinking, hope itself is treated as a lie. You are broken, they say. The world is broken too. Nothing can be repaired. And then, in 2021, the movement shifts again. No longer content with anonymity, black pill figures start reaching outward. They want scale. They want replication. One name begins to trend: Roman McClay. Self-described as a Sigma male. A novelist. An outsider with answers. Online, he's introduced like a myth. Location unclear. Tone deliberately unsettling. Hosts speak to him as if he's a philosopher instead of what he's actually describing. His book gains momentum. Fans talk about adaptations. Big names are mentioned casually, as if endorsement is inevitable. It moved faster than people seemed ready for. In interviews, his language slips. He divides the world cleanly. Civilized people on one side, violent ones on the other. What goes unnoticed at first is how easily he crosses between the two. He bristles at the label. Violence, he says, is too easily dismissed as sickness. Calling someone a psychopath lets society avoid a harder question: why some men feel pushed into that role in the first place. He talks about being told to soften, to stop acting dominant, to accept that masculinity itself is the problem. In his telling, that criticism becomes proof of betrayal rather than correction. The book, he explains later, was meant to reach people like him. Men who felt written off. Men who wanted to feel restored by rage rather than healed from it. He speaks like he's been preparing that defense for a long time. The novel is called Sanction. It's enormous. More than 1 million words. Longer than most people could finish even if they tried. Inside it, the author doesn't hide. He writes himself into the story under another name, Lyndon McLeod, which also happens to be the name he used before rebranding himself online. In the book, Lyndon kills people. Not vague enemies. Specific individuals. Real names. People connected to the author's own past, placed into fiction without much disguise. When the novel appears online, reactions split immediately. In manosphere circles, it's praised as fearless. Outside of that bubble, readers recoil. One review says it out loud: the violence isn't incidental. It's admired. As the debate spreads, the author responds in real time. Threats appear online. Not metaphors. Direct warnings aimed at critics and their families. For followers who already shared his worldview, the book becomes scripture. They call it a manifesto, a guide, the final word for men who feel abandoned. That's when it stops being just a book. Others dismiss it outright. They write angry posts. Assume it will fade. 2 weeks, maybe less. But for the people leaning in, it's something else entirely. They talk about exile, about losing a tribe and finding a new one that finally listens. The author notices that devotion. He talks about loyalty openly, about not having tested how far it goes, and realizing he might not need to. Within that inner circle, readers understand something unsettling. The victims in the novel are not symbolic. They are listed, hidden in plain sight across hundreds of pages. One name carries more weight than the rest. Her name is Alicia Cardenas. She is remembered first as an artist, a muralist, a teacher, a woman who believed fiercely in connection. Friends describe her as strong, uncompromising, generous with her time. Someone who pulled people together rather than pushing them out. A fighter, but never for domination. Every story about her starts with how much space she made for others. She spoke often about care, about reminding people of their worth, about community as something you practice, not something you claim. A phrase guided her, a blend of Lakota and Nahuatl meaning that all things are connected. She didn't just say it. She lived as if it were true. That wasn't always easy. When she entered the tattoo world in the early 1990s, it was openly hostile, controlled by gangs, by men with power and nothing to prove. For a young woman of color, the danger wasn't abstract. Threats were real. Weapons were real. Violence wasn't a metaphor. Many women were exploited in that industry, abused, silenced, and that reality stretched far beyond one city. Alicia refused to accept that as the cost of entry. She worked whatever jobs she could find, delivered food, cleaned houses, saved until she could build something different. Eventually, she opened Soul Tribe. Not just a tattoo shop, a refuge. She hired artists others had rejected, mentored teenagers, fed people who had nowhere else to go, painted messages of healing across walls that once held nothing. Her closest collaborator, Jimmy Maldonado, was there from the start. Together, they built a space centered on inclusion. Not everyone wanted that to exist. There was pushback, sexist remarks, racist hostility, people who didn't like seeing a community like theirs succeed. You could feel that resistance even when things were going well. Still, Alicia kept going, because connection to her wasn't optional. It was the work. The first warning came through glass. A rock through the front window. Not random. Heavy enough to shatter, loud enough to be heard down the block. It was meant to scare them. It didn't. She just looked at it like, okay, we'll fix this too. Alicia believed things didn't have to stay broken. That spaces could be rebuilt with intention. That the world people inherited wasn't the only version available. She and Jimmy poured everything into Soul Tribe. Long hours, Little money at first. A lot of trust. Over time, it worked. Broadway Street changed. More shops opened. Different voices. A loose network of places that felt safer, more open, less afraid. Alicia became more than a shop owner. People called her a matriarch, sometimes joking, sometimes not. Someone who held the center when things got messy. From the outside, it looked like she'd won. The dream finally lived. But someone from her past hadn't let go. December 27th, 2021. 3 days after Christmas. The shop is closing for the night. Jimmy's wife, Alyssa, is there helping clean. She and Jimmy mention, almost casually, that they're trying to have a baby. It feels hopeful. The kind of news Alicia loved hearing. She'd officiated their wedding a couple of years earlier. They're talking, tidying up, and then the door opens. It was quiet for a second, like everyone was trying to place the face. The man hasn't been seen in nearly 20 years. When recognition hits, it lands hard. Something about him feels wrong. Not just unexpected wrong. His name is Lyndon McLeod. Back in the late 1990s, he arrived in Denver after leaving a commune called Zendik Farm. He drifted, found the tattoo scene, eventually walked into Soul Tribe. At first, he talked. To everyone, especially Alicia. She believed in second chances. When she looked at him, she saw someone fractured, searching for meaning. They connected quickly. That connection didn't last. The charm thinned out. Cynicism took its place. Jokes edged toward insults. Ideas landed like warnings instead of thoughts. She ended it before it could get worse. Years later, during an interview, Alicia spoke about a past relationship that scared her. She didn't name him. She didn't have to. She talked about aggression, about a fixation on dominance, about a man who called himself an alpha for too long. She said she was grateful she walked away alive. While Alicia was building community, Lyndon disappeared. Literally. He moved into the woods, built a container home, cut himself off. Online, the isolation hardened into belief. He convinced himself that Alicia, and others like her, were responsible for everything that had gone wrong. That's when he wrote Sanction. A revenge fantasy stretched across more than 1 million words. In it, his fictional stand-in murders real people, including Alicia by name. When he hinted online that the story might not stay fictional, some followers pulled back. A few contacted federal authorities. Nothing stopped him. That December night, he walks into Soul Tribe wearing black leather and body armor. He carries a rifle. He doesn't speak. The fantasy becomes real. Early that same morning, miles away, Ashley Ferris clocks in for her shift in Lakewood. She's exhausted, running on coffee and almost no sleep. Her divorce is still raw. The holidays were quiet in a way that hurt. It's the first Christmas she spent alone. She needed help she hadn't asked for. Didn't say out loud. Still, she showed up. Half the department was out sick. Sometimes you just keep moving because stopping feels worse. Then a message comes in from a coworker. Not about the case. About her. A warning. That she wasn't herself. That her attitude had shifted. That she should fix it. Course correct. She reads it. And keeps going. What that coworker couldn't see was how close she already was to the edge. Ashley used to be the one making people laugh in the locker room. The one who noticed when someone went quiet and asked anyway. That version of her hadn't vanished overnight. It had just worn down. Now, when she goes home, it's her pets that keep her anchored. That and routine. She'd dealt with depression before. Anxiety too. She'd brushed up against help, tested the edges of it, then pulled back. Opening everything felt heavier than carrying it alone. By midday, she's sitting in her patrol car in an empty parking lot. Engine off. Hands on the wheel. Trying to breathe through it. Lakewood officers patrol solo. Hours pass without conversation. Silence leaves room for thoughts to spiral. She starts crying. Then her phone buzzes. A fellow officer asks if he should walk her dog during her shift. A simple question. A lifeline, really. That was the moment, the one where things could have gone differently. She knows what to say, what not to say. She understands the system well enough to avoid being pulled off duty. She skirts the truth carefully. Mentions exhaustion. Mentions not knowing how much longer she can do this. He asks the questions they're trained to ask. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about ending your life? She doesn't answer directly. Inside, the decision feels settled. She plans to go home after work. She's made peace with it. The rest of the shift drags by. Calls come in. Nothing unusual. She even agrees to work a double. If this is it, she tells herself, she might as well help the team. Then, just after 5 in the afternoon, the radio cuts through. Rifle casings reported near City Hospital. A suspect moving south. Shots fired. The tone changes instantly. Ashley presses the accelerator. She's listening, trying to assemble fragments as they come in. Officers shouting over each other. Locations changing fast. At 5:25, Denver officers find Alicia and Alyssa at Soul Tribe. They manage to save Jimmy barely. The shooter is already gone. Minutes later, he forces his way into the apartment of a former business partner, tattoo artist Jeremy Costello. A name Jeremy recognizes because it's written in the book. A version of him dies there on the page. In real life, he and his family escape. Others don't. At 5:45, a contractor Lyndon once worked with is killed in his home. For minutes later, police spot the black van. They don't yet know how deliberate this all is. They only know he's dangerous. The chase ends violently. 2 police cruisers are wrecked. The suspect escapes again, heading toward Lakewood. By then, it felt like the night was unraveling faster than anyone could follow. He goes straight to another tattoo shop. Lucky 13. At 5:58, he kills another former partner in front of customers. No warning. Then he walks into a restaurant. Moves behind the counter. Pours himself a drink like he belongs there. The glass shatters on the floor. A gun comes out. At 6:04, police confront him again. Another exchange of gunfire. Ashley is racing toward all of it. Sirens screaming. Heart pounding. She doesn't know yet that this night, the one she planned to survive, is about to decide something else entirely. He makes it into a hotel. A Hyatt. Bright lobby. Open space. People just doing their jobs. Inside, he kills a front desk worker named Sarah Steck. She's 28 years old. She isn't mentioned anywhere in the book. She isn't part of the fantasy. She's just there. By 6:10 in the evening, Ashley finally reaches the area. The last known location. Adrenaline pushing her past exhaustion. No one knows where he's going next. But Ashley has a feeling. She knows he's tied to tattoo shops. Not specifics, just patterns. There's one north of her position. And then she sees him. It's strange how fast recognition happens when it matters. He walks straight toward her. She asks who he is. She doesn't remember his answer. Her body already knows. There's a movement, quick, deliberate, his right hand. She tries to stop it, tells him not to do this. He answers anyway. At that moment, she understands there's no talking left. She steps back, draws her weapon, keeps her eyes on him. Behind him, people are moving, a crowd forming without realizing it. Ashley hesitates. She doesn't want to miss, doesn't want to hit anyone else. He doesn't hesitate at all. Gunfire. She's hit, goes down hard. Later, she'll say something quietly devastating. She had planned to take her own life that night, and he chose to shoot her first. Lying on the pavement, bleeding heavily, head striking concrete, she makes a decision. This doesn't end here. It wasn't about surviving. It was about stopping him. She knows he'll keep going if she doesn't. He'll kill more people. He'll kill the officers racing in to help her. Her vision blurs. Ears ringing. The world narrowing. She notices something through the haze. The crowd has scattered. She steadies herself with what strength she has left. Raises the weapon. Fires. Later, she'll remember the Christmas lights reflecting off wet pavement. The calm of it, unexpectedly. The moment she realizes he's no longer shooting. She thinks she's dying. And somehow she's okay with that. Because she stayed in the fight. Then she hears footsteps. Voices. Her people. They run straight toward danger to reach her. You never really know how people will act, until they do. They pull her to safety. Tell her they've got her. Tell her to stay with them. She does. At the scene, Lyndon McLeod is pronounced dead. The bullet went through his heart, the one place his body armor didn't cover. Doctors will later say it shouldn't have been possible. But it was. In the weeks that follow, Ashley undergoes multiple surgeries. Doctors work to save her left leg. Recovery is slow, painful. In another hospital, Jimmy is healing too. Learning to walk again. Learning how to exist without his wife. When he's released a week later, the reality finally lands. The loss. The silence. He speaks about Alyssa with love. With devastation. With resolve. Ashley is eventually discharged as well. The community calls her a hero. She doesn't argue. She just knows she's still here. The word hero never quite fit. It felt too clean. Too simple for a day that almost ended very differently. Ashley couldn't accept the praise without telling the rest of it. The parts people didn't see. The part where she wasn't brave, just still breathing. So she starts talking. Not polished. Not rehearsed. She tells anyone who will listen what her head sounded like that morning. What she planned to do when her shift ended. And how close she came to never making it home. She doesn't say it for shock. You can hear that. It's more like relief. For the first time, people understand the full shape of that day. That stopping Lyndon wasn't just about courage under fire. It was about surviving herself. That's when she decides the story has a job to do. She talks about vulnerability like it's a tool, not a weakness. About saying the quiet part out loud. About purpose being something you borrow from other people when you can't feel your own. She admits it was uncomfortable. Sitting in front of cameras. Saying she had planned to take her own life. But someone had to start saying it. Especially in law enforcement. Especially in jobs where suffering is treated like part of the uniform. It's strange how honest things get when someone finally goes first. She asks a question that doesn't have an easy answer. If you would run toward someone holding a gun, why wouldn't you run toward someone breaking quietly inside? For her, the fight didn't end that night. Today, Ashley leads A Fighting Chance. A nonprofit focused on helping officers, first responders, and civilians recognize depression early and talk about it before it turns fatal. The work centers on resilience, on purpose, on staying connected when isolation feels safer. Meanwhile, Jimmy keeps moving forward too, slowly, with help. His purpose stays rooted in memory, in honoring Alicia and Alyssa not as victims, but as the people they were. On the 3rd anniversary of the shooting, he writes a message online. Quiet, personal. He talks about cooking dinner alone, about setting out food for them after 5 in the evening, around the time everything began. About prayer, about gratitude existing alongside grief. That kind of love doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. He writes that the pain never leaves. You just learn how to carry it. He thanks people for remembering, for speaking their names, for keeping their spirits present. The message ends with a date, December 27th, 2024. And that's where the story finally rests. Not in violence, not in notoriety, but in the people who stayed. Story 5. The knock comes with a question that sounds almost casual. Are you Mr. McCurley? The answer comes back just as flat. Yes. Another voice says the same name again, like it might unlock something. Someone mutters from behind him that he is not doing anything. That man is Glenn McCurley. He is in his late 70s now. For decades, investigators have quietly linked him to the disappearances of as many as 7 women and girls around Fort Worth, stretching from the late 1960s into the mid-1980s. Nothing ever stuck. No charges. No courtroom. Just time passing, almost half a century of it, without consequence. Officers leave that day the same way they came. No warrant. No leverage. They tell him they will be back. He does not react. The file should have died there. Most do. But sometimes a case keeps breathing because one person refuses to let it go. It's strange how one memory can keep pulling you back, even when everything else tells you to stop. Jim Walker never stopped. He was 12 when his sister vanished. Long before he had the language for grief, he had a picture in his head he could not shake. Years later, he admitted he used to sleep inside the tunnel where her body had been found, waiting. Not for answers. For the man himself. Carla was 17. Older, confident, the kind of sister you look up to without realizing it. To Jim, she felt untouchable. Beautiful. Permanent. She did well in school. People liked her. And she had a boyfriend who had been around long enough to feel like family. Rodney McCoy, her high school sweetheart. On Valentine's night, they went out together. Rodney was 18, nervous in a quiet way. For months he had been carrying something small in his pocket, planning this moment. A promise ring. A tiny rose shape, a single diamond in the center. To him, it meant staying. Choosing. Saying something without saying it out loud. She opened the box and smiled. That part stayed with him. Later, they joined friends at the school dance. Music. Sweat. Laughter. The kind of night that feels endless when you are that young. When it ended, they drove off looking for somewhere private, just to sit, to talk, to be close. The interruption did not come with warning. A door opening. A shape in the dark. A pistol appearing where nothing had been a second before. Rodney never saw the man's face. He remembered the impact of the gun against his cheek. The sound of Carla's voice breaking through it, begging him to stop. Saying she would go. The barrel came close to Rodney's face. Close enough that the clicking of the trigger drowned out everything else. Back at the Walker house, Jim was asleep on the couch when the sound of tires hitting a curb tore him awake. Then yelling. A name being shouted into the night. He ran outside and saw Rodney stumbling across the lawn, soaked in blood, barely upright. The passenger door of the car hung open. Carla was gone. The family poured out of the house. Rodney tried to explain through shock and pain, words tangled and incomplete. It did not sound right. None of it did. By morning, law enforcement filled the house. Local police, federal agents, sheriff deputies. Search plans unfolded in clipped sentences. Rodney became the center of the attention, the only visible thread to pull. At school, in the neighborhood, whispers hardened into certainty. Everyone seemed convinced he was involved. Everyone except the Walkers. We knew how shaken he was. That part was obvious. Rodney stayed in their home after he was released from the hospital. He slept upstairs in Carla's room. It was not symbolic. It was practical, and it was love. The family closed ranks around him while the town looked in. Days passed without results. Then a detective remembered another girl, found the year before. Similar age. Similar disappearance. Her body had been discovered inside a cattle culvert outside the city. The search shifted quietly, almost reluctantly, toward the network of drainage tunnels scattered through the countryside. The Walkers followed. No one said much. Inside one of those tunnels, everything stopped. Jim heard his mother scream. Not loud. Not long. The kind of sound that ends things. Carla's death rippled through Fort Worth. Grief spread faster than facts ever had. At her funeral, more than 1,000 people came. Friends, neighbors, classmates, people who did not know her but felt like they should have. Rodney stood with the family, surrounded and alone at the same time. Suspicion hung in the air, heavy and unresolved, even as the town said goodbye. It felt like the questions were louder than the prayers. And somewhere far from the church, a name remained untouched. Waiting. Rodney feels at the moment he walks into the room. The looks do not try to hide themselves. Classmates, parents, people he barely knows, all watching him as if he carries an answer he does not have. He keeps his head down anyway and moves forward. He stops at the casket. Just for a moment. He tells himself it will be quick. When he looks at Carla, something feels wrong before he can explain it. The ring is gone. The promise ring he gave her is not there. The night crashes back all at once. The gun. The door opening. The way everything fell apart in seconds. His legs give out. Someone catches him before he hits the floor. It was like the air just left him all at once. Later, Rodney will say it felt like his heart dropped straight through him. That whatever strength he had been borrowing finally ran out. When the day ends, so does his place in the Walker home. That night is the last time he sleeps in Carla's bed. Not long after graduation, he leaves Texas. He heads north to work on an oil rig in Alaska. He never comes back to Fort Worth. For years afterward, the thoughts follow him. He believes Carla saved his life. That if she had not stepped forward, he would not be here. And the weight of imagining her fear that night stays with him, long after the faces fade. When Rodney disappears from Jim's world, the house feels even emptier. Grief fills every room, but Jim does not feel sadness the way the adults do. What settles into him is something sharper. Anger. It turns into a fixation. He wants the man who took her. Wants him badly enough that he starts doing strange things. Dangerous things. He sneaks out to the culvert where her body was found and sleeps there waiting. Hoping someone will come back. He wasn't thinking like a kid anymore. Not really. Jim tells himself he needs to know. Whether she was alive when she entered that place. What it felt like. What the air smelled like. He lies there in the cold, trying to absorb answers that never arrive. No one ever comes. Not the killer. Not the truth. Still, he refuses to let it go. He convinces himself that if he becomes a police officer, he can finish what was never finished. The moment he is old enough, he applies to the academy. He gets in. For a while, it feels like the path is finally opening. Then his eyesight starts to blur. Words smear together. Shapes lose their edges. During an exam, it becomes impossible to ignore. Doctors eventually give it a name. A rare genetic condition. He is losing his vision. Permanently. That kind of news changes how you see the rest of your life. The diagnosis ends his career before it begins. There is no treatment, no reversal, just the knowledge that it will likely get worse. The dream of solving his sister's case collapses quietly, without ceremony. One by one, his siblings leave Fort Worth. Jobs, families, distance. The years stretch on. Decades pass. By the time the year 2020 arrives, Jim is the only walker still there. His marriage is failing. His father dies. Later, his mother follows. Jim believes they carried the case with them, unspoken, all the way to the end. It felt like everyone took a piece of the fight with them when they left. Alone, his resolve hardens. Every year, he makes the same call. Fort Worth Police. Cold Case Division. He asks the same questions, hears the same careful responses. 1 year, an investigator tells him there are 971 unsolved murder cases. Jim listens, then says he understands, says his heart aches for every family, and then adds, quietly, that he only needs one case reopened. Because whoever did this is either gone, dying, or running out of time. On the other end of the line is a new voice. Detective Leah Wagner. She listens longer than most. When she reads the file, something catches. A teenage girl. A family still calling. Wagner says later that the mother in her could not ignore it. That it felt personal in a way she could not set aside. She reopens the case. After 46 years, the door cracks open again. Jim does not celebrate. He prepares. He has lived his entire life for this possibility. Hope is not loud for him. It is fragile, but it is all he has left. You don't let yourself believe too hard. Not at first. Wagner starts where it began. Valentine's night. The gun. The blow to Rodney's head. She notices something that did not stand out before. The weapon jammed. As Rodney drifted in and out, the attacker worked the gun, trying to clear it. That moment matters, because Carla saw what was happening. She understood what came next. She stepped forward, said she would go if he stopped hurting Rodney. She was buying time, trading herself for his life. Rodney remembers her face. He remembers her screaming his name, telling him to run and get her father. That was the last thing he ever heard her say. And for the first time in decades, someone is finally listening to that moment. That was it. Rodney never saw her again. He remembers his body going slack, falling forward into the seat as the darkness closed in. The case did not end there. Back in 1974, investigators gathered what they could. They collected the gun magazine, still full. They took Carla's torn clothing. And they logged one detail that quietly shifted suspicion onto Rodney almost immediately. The ring. The promise ring was not on her finger. It was found in the culvert, near her body. No one ever explained why it was there. Whether someone removed it on purpose. Whether it came off during a struggle. That uncertainty lingered, and it followed Rodney for years. Detective Wagner refuses to let that detail steer her the same way it did before. Her focus stays narrow. Find the person who killed Carla. Clear the one who did not. Rodney has been living far from Fort Worth for decades, shaped by the weight of what people believed about him. Wagner understands that cold cases do not reopen cleanly. They reopen with tools that did not exist before. DNA. She knows the case will live or die on what can still be recovered. Sometimes it's not about finding something new. It's about looking again. Boxes are opened. Paperwork spread out. Evidence logs reread. In the records, they find a note from years earlier. In 2009, a small amount of DNA had been recovered from Carla's dress. That meant there might be more. Somewhere. They keep going. What they find next is better than they hoped for. A single-source male DNA profile recovered from Carla's bra. Clean. Usable. Enough to matter. For the first time, there is something concrete. Something that can be entered into the national database. But it comes with problems. The amount is tiny. 5 nanograms. The smallest sample Wagner has ever worked with. Any attempt to process it risks destroying it completely. And when the partial profile is checked, it does not match anyone already in the system. It can rule people out, but it cannot name anyone yet. So it sits there, useful but incomplete. Wagner knows one more option exists. A private lab south of Houston. New technology. Experimental in a way. Capable of pulling more information from almost nothing. The cost is absolute. The process would consume what remains of the sample. There would be no second chance. Jim does not hesitate. At that point, waiting didn't feel safer than trying. They move forward. And this time it works. The expanded profile produces a name. One Wagner recognizes immediately. Glenn McCurley. She pulls the old files. He was suspect number 22 back in the original investigation. At the time, police had questioned every local man who owned a registered Ruger pistol. A loaded magazine had been found at the abduction site. McCurley owned one. He took a polygraph. He passed, and the trail went cold. But DNA does not explain itself away. Wagner checks current records. McCurley is still living in Fort Worth, just a few miles from where Carla was taken. An officer is sent to the house. Casual. Conversational. "Are you Mr. McCurley?" "Yes." Another voice calls for him from inside. He jokes at first. Plays it off. Then the questions shift. Wagner explains why they are there. A young woman. A kidnapping in the 1970s. A case being reviewed again. His name appearing in the file. McCurley repeats the same story he has told for decades. Says they have the wrong man. Says he has never killed anyone. Wagner offers him a way to clear his name. A DNA test. He resists. Says they already went through all that. That's usually when you start listening closer. His wife, Judy, does not stay quiet. She interrupts him, corrects him, points out that DNA testing did not exist back then. When he starts piecing together an alibi, she cuts in again. Adjusts the timeline. Says she was with him part of the time. The room shifts, and Wagner takes note of every word. "That's not true, Glenn." She stops him mid-sentence. Says it plainly. Says she remembers. He had gone to Midland. His parents still lived there. The correction lands hard, not loud, but it hangs in the air. McCurley does not have to give a DNA sample. He knows that. Wagner knows it too. When he refuses, she does not argue. She waits. That night, officers return quietly. They go through the trash outside his home. No confrontation. No conversation. Just patience. Inside one of the bags, they find a plastic straw from a fast food cup. It is enough. The DNA matches. Not loosely. Not partially. It fits the original sample. A judge signs the warrant. On September 21st, 2020, Glenn McCurley is taken into custody. During questioning, he keeps denying it at first. Says he never saw her, never spoke to her, would not recognize her if she were standing next to him. Then Wagner tells him the truth. His DNA was found on Carla's body. There is no room left to maneuver. That's the moment when the room usually goes quiet. The question comes gently but directly. What happened? How did you kill her? He hesitates. Then he says it. I guess I killed her. The words do not sound rehearsed. They sound old. When Jim hears the news, he breaks. He remembers Wagner telling him they finally had the man. He cries. Then he calls Rodney. There is a pause on the line. Long enough to feel everything that has been waiting behind it. When Jim says they know who did it, Rodney starts crying too. Later, Wagner asks McCurley where he left Carla's body. He gives directions. Says it was beside a building. But that is not where she was found. The mistake matters. It suggests something else. Another location. Another scene. The detectives press him. Slowly. Carefully. McCurley shuts down. At 77 years old, he goes silent, leaving Wagner with unanswered questions and a growing fear that Carla may not have been the only one. For Jim, the familiar weight settles back in. He knows this feeling. He has lived with it most of his life. But he is not a child anymore, sleeping in tunnels and waiting in the dark. He understands now what he is actually looking for. Not revenge. Peace. That kind of clarity usually comes after you're tired of carrying everything else. Jim says he feels compassion. Says forgiveness matters to him. Not for McCurley's sake, but for his own. He believes that holding on to hatred only gives it more room to live. Still, the questions remain. For years, Carla's death has sat alongside other unsolved cases. Women and girls taken around Valentine's Day in the Fort Worth area. Similar timing. Similar silence. None of them resolved. And now another family is pulled into that gravity. Days before the trial, McCurley's son, Roddy, tries to reach his father. He wants answers. Wants the truth to be complete. If there were other victims, he wants their families to have peace too. He believes, briefly, that his father might listen to him. That love might still be enough to break through. Sometimes you ask anyway, even when you already know the answer. When Roddy looks into his father's eyes, he sees nothing there. No recognition. No opening. Just distance. He says if his father loves him at all, he would lift that weight. Say what needs to be said. Let the truth settle where it belongs. That is what Roddy wants. Peace. And it is the one thing no one can force. Nearly 5 decades after Carla Walker was killed, the trial finally begins in a Tarrant County courtroom. It is August 19th, 2021. Time has compressed everything into this space. 47 years of waiting, now contained within rows of benches and quiet glances. Jim sits in the courtroom and feels the stillness after Rodney finishes testifying. Rodney had come back to Fort Worth to say what happened that night, to say it out loud where it mattered. When he steps down, the silence does not lift. Jim is aware of the McCurley family nearby. He cannot see their faces, but he knows they are there. He knows the weight they are carrying. For him, Carla's absence has shaped an entire lifetime. For them, the loss is sudden, unfolding in real time. And Jim realizes something. He cannot let the day end without doing what feels right. After court lets out, he walks over to Glenn McCurley's son, Roddy. He can see it immediately. The shock. The collapse of a world that was never supposed to look like this. You don't need details to recognize that kind of pain. Jim introduces himself, says his name, asks how Roddy is holding up. There is no agenda behind it, just presence. Then he asks if he can give him a hug. They embrace. Jim tells him something simple, that he is not responsible for his father's actions, that this does not belong to him, that he does not have to carry it. Roddy does not expect comfort from the brother of the girl his father killed. The fact that it comes at all stays with him. Jim could have turned away. Instead, he chose closeness. That kind of grace catches you off guard. The next day, something unusual happens in the courtroom. Jim and Rodney take their seats beside the McCurley family. Victims and survivors sit together, not divided by rows, not separated by history. When the judge asks everyone to rise, Roddy looks at his father. Their eyes meet, and something shifts. Glenn McCurley leans toward his attorney. Whispers. The attorney stands and walks directly to the judge. The court is adjourned without warning. Before a third day of testimony can even begin, the trial stops. McCurley changes his plea. He pleads guilty to the murder of 17-year-old Carla Walker. After nearly half a century, the question of who killed Carla Walker is no longer unanswered. The judge sentences McCurley to life in prison. In the courtroom, emotions finally surface. Not loud, not chaotic, just released. To mark the end of the case, Jim and Detective Wagner plan something quiet, something personal. For Rodney, they return what he lost all those years ago, the promise ring. Some things don't stop mattering, no matter how much time passes. Rodney does not expect it. When he sees it, the reaction is immediate. He says it gives him back a piece of his heart, that it brings peace he never thought he would feel. Jim stays close, not just to Rodney, but to Roddy as well. The relationship continues beyond the courtroom, beyond the verdict. Jim stands beside him as he learns how to live with the truth of who his father was. Roddy says he does not know what he would do without Jim, that some connections do not make sense at first, only later. Glenn McCurley is later linked to multiple unsolved cases. Investigators believe he may have killed between 4 and 7 women and girls in and around Fort Worth over nearly 2 decades. Some of those cases remain unresolved. Carla's case closes, but the pattern raises new questions. To address cases like these, lawmakers push for funding to expand access to advanced forensic testing. A bill is proposed in Carla's name, designed to help law enforcement solve cases where DNA evidence exists but technology has lagged behind. The goal is simple. Give other families what the Walkers finally received. No family's loss is bigger than another's. They all deserve answers. Jim says he hopes Carla knew they never stopped looking, that they did not give up, that her life mattered enough to change what came after. And in that way, even after all this time, she is still being carried forward. Story 6. He speaks into a cassette recorder, voice steady, almost casual. He says he wants to date. He wants to meet women. Socially. He explains it like a preference, not a plan. Nothing about danger. Nothing that sounds urgent. Just a man describing a need to connect. Back then, in the 1980s, recordings like this were normal. People mailed them in. A voice instead of a profile photo. Somewhere in all of that, one tape slips through unnoticed. No one listening knows what they're actually hearing. By 1984, he's in Miami. The Miss Florida pageant is underway. Cameras everywhere. Bright lights. A room full of young women who are used to being watched. One of the finalists appears on screen, smiling, composed. Not long after the event ends, she vanishes. No noise. No struggle in public. Just gone. Police start tracing the last places she'd been seen. A photographer keeps coming up. He lingered near the contestants, always holding a camera, always nearby. It felt off, but not enough to stop him at the time. Around that same period, at the Miami Grand Prix, another woman disappears. Different location, different crowd, but witnesses remember the same face. This time, though, he wasn't holding a camera. He was behind the wheel of a race car. That's when investigators realize they're not looking at coincidence. They try to track him down. He's already left the city. No forwarding address. No clear direction. That's the part that stands out. He wasn't hiding. He was just moving. Reports begin stacking up. Young women missing in different states. Different events. Different excuses used to approach them. The sense inside law enforcement shifts from concern to urgency. No one can say where he's headed next. If they don't catch him soon, the trail could go cold by morning. He could cross state lines. He could disappear into routine. Then something happens that wasn't supposed to. One woman survives. She's 16 years old. She shouldn't be alive. But she is. And what she remembers changes everything. Not long after, attention turns north. Tallahassee, Florida. It's still 1984. A 19-year-old college student named Linda is in her second year at Florida State University. Her life is ordinary in the best way. Classes. A steady boyfriend she's been with for 5 years. Long drives toward the Gulf, just to watch the water. For her, everything feels open, stable, predictable. On March 20th, she runs a quick errand to Governor's Square Mall. It's not planned as a big outing, just something to get done before heading back. That mall becomes the last place anyone can place her for a while. 12 hours pass. Early on March 21st, Linda appears again. This time, she's 40 miles away. Barefoot. Disoriented. She pushes open the door of a roadside motel in Bainbridge, Georgia, and walks straight to the front desk. The night manager freezes when he sees her. She's shaking. Her voice barely holds together. She asks for help. A sheriff's deputy arrives within minutes. Linda manages to say only a few words. She says a man took her. She says he hurt her. An ambulance is called. The deputy goes to the room she indicates. When the door opens, the air changes. Blood across the carpet. On the walls. Pieces of torn duct tape scattered on the floor. Backup is requested. Forensics are called in. Whatever happened here wasn't brief. Linda is taken to Memorial Hospital in Georgia. Her injuries are severe. Still, she insists on speaking. She answers questions slowly, carefully. She doesn't drift. She doesn't guess. Word spreads fast. A survivor. A description. Nearly 500 miles away, 2 detectives in Miami read the report. Detective Hanlon and his partner stop mid-page. The details feel too familiar. Tall. Well-dressed. Trim beard and mustache. A slight accent. They book the next flight. When details repeat like that, you stop calling it a pattern and start calling it a person. At the hospital, they sit with Linda and listen. She tells them how a man approached her inside the store. He asked if she'd ever considered modeling. She said no. She mentioned her boyfriend. She tried to end the conversation. He followed her anyway. Out in the parking lot, she felt it shift. Something tightened. She remembers a sudden blow to her chest. The air leaving her body. Then waking up inside his car. There isn't much physical evidence to work with. This is still early in forensic science. Her memory matters more than anything else. She talks about the motel room. How he was distracted. Sitting near the television. Not watching her closely. She saw the door latch and ran for it. She didn't make it. They struggled. Time blurred. She doesn't know how long it lasted. What she noticed wasn't his strength. It was his inattention. That detail stays with the investigators. Not because it explains what he did, but because it explains how she lived. She explains it quietly. He struck her on the head. The world tipped, and she let herself fall back. She stayed still while he was on top of her, letting her body go loose, convincing him she was unconscious. She waited, just long enough. Then she drove her fingers into his eyes and ran. Locked herself in the bathroom. Lay on the floor and did not move. She decided to be dead. When she finally opened the door, the room was empty. The officers don't interrupt her. They don't rush the moment. What she did wasn't luck. It was judgment. And if they're right about who took her, that judgment may have interrupted a long line of deaths. They bring out photographs next. Not many, just a small stack. Linda looks once. Then again. She points immediately. No hesitation. She doesn't know his full name, but the detectives do. Christopher Wilder. They've been circling him for weeks. Now they know he crossed state lines with her. That kind of identification doesn't come with doubt. You can hear it when it's settled. Detective Hanlon knows the moment matters. This is no longer a local case. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is contacted. They already have history with Wilder. When Elizabeth Kenyon, a Miss Florida finalist, disappeared, he had been seeing her, dating her. When investigators went looking for him afterward, he was gone. No explanation. No goodbye. Elizabeth wasn't the first. A week earlier, Rosario Gonzalez vanished during the Miami Grand Prix. Wilder had been part of that race. The overlap was becoming impossible to ignore. Back at the hospital, Linda keeps answering questions. While she speaks, new reports begin arriving. Different towns, different states. The same approach, the same aftermath. Cheryl Bonaventura, an aspiring model, disappears from a shopping center in Mesa, Colorado. A young woman from Oklahoma is found dead in Kansas. Her body is discovered the day after Susan goes missing. Las Vegas becomes another point on the map. The seventh city. 17-year-old Michelle Korfman from Boulder City has been missing for 3 days. An investigator later says that when the phone rang, there was no question who it would be about. Wherever Wilder passed through, someone did not survive. The timing was what made it unbearable. It never felt random. By early April 1984, the pattern is undeniable. 2 weeks since Linda escaped. A month since Wilder first caught police attention after the Grand Prix. The pace is accelerating. On the West Coast, in Torrance, California, a 16-year-old girl named Tina walks through a mall. She's looking for a summer job. Nothing urgent. Just applications. Store to store. Later that day, a man approaches her. They talk. People notice because it looks polite. Almost formal. They don't seem to know each other, but nothing appears wrong. Moments later, they're seen walking toward the parking lot. Then she's in his car. She disappears. The next day, Tina's mother, Carol, contacts police. Her daughter never came home. No call. No message. She mentions some trouble with a boyfriend, and the response slows. Officers assume a teenage argument. A cooling-off period. They don't yet understand what kind of time matters here. 200 miles away, in a motel room heavy with silence, Tina stares at the ceiling. She can't move. The man from the mall is asleep beside her. His words repeat in her head. He told her he had killed before. He told her he would do it again if she didn't comply. When morning comes, he puts her back in the car. He covers her eyes. Even without seeing, she knows where the gun is, where the knife is. She feels the space they occupy. They drive for hours. No conversation. Just motion. When the car finally slows, she knows they've stopped for the night. Another motel. That evening, Wilder stands beside her holding scissors. Tina's hair is long. Without warning, he cuts the first section to her chin. No explanation. That's when she understands something important. He's changing how she looks. And with fear, mixed with a strange sense of relief, she realizes why. He doesn't want her recognized, which likely means he wants to keep her alive. It's unsettling what relief can attach itself to when options disappear. A routine forms. Driving all day until the light fades. Brief stops for gas. For food. At drive-in restaurants, Tina scans for chances. A bathroom window. A scrap of paper. Anything that could stay behind. But Wilder is always watching. By now, whatever hope Tina had is thinned down to almost nothing. 6 days have passed since she vanished. 6 days of moving, stopping, waiting, listening. By the 7th day, April 10th, the car pulls into Gary, Indiana. It's far from California. Far enough that home feels theoretical. That's when Wilder changes the rules. He tells her she has one way to stay alive. She has to help him find another girl. Inside the local mall, Tina walks slowly, her legs heavy. Wilder stays close, always just within her vision. She tries not to look at anyone too long. Tries not to imagine what helping would mean. Then she sees it happen. Wilder's attention fixes on one girl. About her age. He looks at Tina and gives a small nod. Not a suggestion. An order. She approaches the girl and introduces herself. The girl smiles back. Her name is Dawn. Tina talks about a beauty competition, mentions a photographer. Wilder. Dawn listens, interested, flattered. She agrees to step outside. It happens fast. Wilder shoves Dawn into the car. Doors slam. The engine roars, and the mall disappears behind them. That moment, it's where choice stops being real. As they drive, the tone shifts. Wilder drops the charm completely. He tells Dawn what he told Tina, that he's killed before. That obedience is the only thing keeping her alive. Night comes. A motel in Ohio. Inside the room, the first thing he does is break the bathroom lock. No exits. No mistakes. He tells Tina to take a bath. She obeys. From the floor of the bathroom, she watches light flicker under the door. Shadows move. She knows exactly what's happening in the other room. It's the same suffering. Repeated. Directed at someone else now. The next morning, they're back on the road, heading east. At one stop, Wilder steps out of the car. For a brief stretch of time, Tina is alone with Dawn. It's April 12th. They reach a motel in Victor, New York. The television is on. Voices fill the room. Then Tina freezes. Her mother is on the screen. She didn't expect that. None of them did. Tina watches as her mother speaks directly into the camera, addressing the man who took her daughter. The words aren't polished. They're raw, protective, angry. She threatens him if their paths ever cross. For Tina, something shifts. People are looking for her. Her family hasn't stopped. Her mother's strength presses through the screen and into the room. For the first time in days, she doesn't feel erased. Wilder reacts differently. Panic replaces control. He starts gathering his things, rushing both girls. He understands now that time is closing in. That faces and voices are multiplying. He's not planning to surrender. Back in police stations across the country, investigators are racing against a clock they can't see. Every lead feels outdated the moment it's logged. Jurisdictions blur. Phone calls lag behind movement. He's already gone. It felt like chasing smoke. Every direction at once. After more than a month of failed attempts to corner him, federal agents decide to try something else. Something public. They release a recording of Wilder himself. Now people can hear his voice. See how he moves. How calm he sounds. And maybe recognize the danger hiding behind the ease. The tape reaches the public, and it lands hard. Not because it sounds threatening, but because it doesn't. A man speaking calmly. Polite. Measured. Someone who could be anywhere. It becomes clear how long he's been hiding in plain sight. Investigators begin filling in the rest. The photographer persona. The race car driver image. Even more disturbing, his name surfaces in connection with violent crimes overseas, stretching back years. Australia is mentioned quietly, almost cautiously. The scope widens. What looked like confidence now reads as cover. Jobs that brought him close to young women. Situations where attention was expected, not questioned. With Tina's mother speaking publicly, and the recording circulating, momentum finally shifts. Calls come in. Tips stack up. Law enforcement begins tightening the circle. Inside the car, none of that feels real. Tina and Dawn are still trapped in the back seat, watching the road blur past. Less than an hour later, Wilder pulls off near the Finger Lakes region. Remote. Trees pressing in on both sides. He turns and tells Dawn to get out. She obeys. He forces her deeper into the woods. Then, without warning, he lunges. His hands close around her throat. The world narrows. Her vision dims. She fights anyway. They fall hard to the ground. She won't stop. Then she sees his hand move. A quick flash. Metal. A knife. The pain is immediate. Overwhelming. She's bleeding badly. Wilder stands up, adjusts himself, and walks away as if he's finished. Dawn stays still. She understands the danger of moving too soon. He could come back. Finish it. Every second stretches. When she can no longer hear him, she forces herself upright. Her body barely responds. She runs anyway. She didn't know how badly she was hurt. She just knew stopping wasn't an option. Light breaks through the trees. The road appears. She uses what she has, tying clothing tight against her chest. Dizzy. Fading. A truck passes, then stops. She's taken to a hospital. Doctors work quickly. Somehow, the wound missed her heart. Police arrive. They listen carefully. Despite the blood loss, she gives them everything she can. His name, where she was taken, and the name of the other girl. Tina. Back on the road, when Wilder returns alone, Tina assumes Dawn is dead. There's no discussion. No explanation. Hours later, the radio crackles to life. A report comes through. A teenage girl has been found alive in rural New York. That's when the silence in the car changes. Tina doesn't know what's happening beyond the dashboard. She doesn't know that, outside the car, the story is shifting. Fast. News coverage begins framing her differently. Questions are asked. Her presence in public spaces is replayed and dissected. She's no longer being described as just a victim. Dawn's survival gives investigators something crucial. Direction. A vehicle description. A heading. For the first time, they're ahead instead of chasing. Wilder feels it. He pulls into the Eastview Mall parking lot in New York. Normally, this is where he slows down. Blends in. This time, he doesn't. From a distance, he spots a woman sitting in her car. Beth Dodge, 33 years old. A mother, driving a gold Pontiac Firebird. At gunpoint, he forces her into his car. Tina is ordered to follow in the Firebird. They don't go far. In a secluded area, Beth steps out. She's told to walk ahead. She doesn't get far. A single gunshot. She's struck from behind. Her body is later found beside the highway by truck drivers passing through. That was the moment everyone knew he was unraveling. Through the night, federal agents work from command centers, mapping movements, replaying timelines, trying to anticipate the next decision of a man who no longer cares about being seen. Christopher Wilder is now among the most wanted in the country, and the hunt is no longer theoretical. Beth was killed for her car. Nothing else. That's what makes it feel different. Wilder didn't lure her. Didn't pretend. He needed the vehicle and took it. For Tina, that shift lands hard. If he can do that, then there's no pattern left to rely on. She starts counting silently. 9 days captive. And wondering when it will be her turn. Violence isn't new to her. Not really. Tina's childhood had already taught her how men like this operate. Her mother struggled with addiction. Stability was rare. Before she was sent to live with her grandmother, she learned to stay quiet, to watch, to adapt. She later explains that as a little girl, she was exposed to things no child should see. Drugs, sexual behavior, abuse that came from people who were supposed to protect her. It started early and lasted years. By the time she was 16, she'd already lived through more than most adults. Some people learn survival before they learn safety. That history matters because it explains how she's still functioning now. How she absorbs control, how she keeps going, but it doesn't prepare her for what comes next. After days of threats, isolation, and fear, Wilder tells her something that makes no sense. He says he's going to let her go. He says he'll take her to the Boston airport. She doesn't believe him. Roadblocks are everywhere by now. Major highways watched. Alerts spreading. Somehow he avoids them all. The car keeps moving. And then they're there. The airport. Bright. Open. Normal. Inside, he buys her a one-way ticket to Los Angeles. People pass by. No one reacts. No one recognizes them. Tina keeps her head down. Wilder looks frantic now. Rushed. Unfocused. At any moment, he could change his mind. He hands her money. Tells her she'll need it. About $1,000 in cash. Then he turns away. Just like that. Walks off. She stands frozen, waiting for him to come back. Watching every direction. Still trapped in the mindset he built around her. Controlled. Unsure what step comes next. It isn't until the plane is in the air that it finally settles. He's not there. He didn't follow. She's alone. It's April 13th. When she lands in Los Angeles, she goes straight to the police. She's exhausted. Disoriented. Free, but not yet safe. Now she has to talk. To explain. To convince people of what really happened. She expects help. Instead, suspicion finds her first. Her father, absent most of her life, suddenly appears with a high-profile criminal defense attorney. Other jurisdictions are involved now. Dawn's case. Beth Dodge's case. Investigators from different states are comparing notes, and some of them believe Tina wasn't just a victim. They think she helped him. Miami detectives want to speak with her directly. They know she spent more than a week traveling with Wilder. They don't know what she'll say, but they know they can't ignore her. At that point, everyone was looking at her, but for different reasons. With the gold Pontiac Firebird identified and Tina in custody, alerts go out nationwide. Officers are told to watch for a distinctive vehicle. A metallic gold, 1982 Pontiac Firebird. Then, in the quiet town of Colebrook, New Hampshire, two state troopers spot a flashy car that doesn't belong. They confirm the plate. It's the Firebird. They approach carefully. If they're right, the driver is armed. Dangerous. Cornered. As they close in, they see movement inside the car. The man reaches down for something. Gunfire erupts. One of the troopers is hit. In the confusion that follows the gunfire, Wilder makes one last decision. He doesn't wait to be taken in. When the noise fades and officers move closer, he's found slumped behind the wheel. Dead. The choice was his. The manhunt ends there. It had been 47 days since the first disappearance was reported. Nearly 7 weeks of motion, fear, and unanswered calls. By the end of it, 12 young women had been taken. 8 never came back. Families are left holding fragments of lives that stopped mid-sentence. People kept saying it was over. I needed to hear it twice before it felt real. When Tina is told he's dead, the first thing she feels isn't celebration. It's confirmation. Then relief. A deep one. The kind that leaves you weak afterward. She later says that if he were still alive, she wouldn't be here. Not in that room. Not telling this story. Only hours after Wilder's death, another headline appears. A teenage girl walks into police headquarters in Torrance, California. It's Tina. She had been seen with Wilder in New York. That detail follows her into the building like a shadow. While Linda and Dawn are being praised publicly for surviving, Tina's presence raises eyebrows. Questions don't wait. The public struggles with her story. It doesn't fit the version they're comfortable with. Her survival looked different. Her captivity looked different. And instead of sympathy, she's met with doubt. She reminds people later that she was a child, a minor, and that the media treated her like an adult suspect from the start. It's easier to judge from the outside than admit fear works differently on everyone. While speculation grows, the Torrance police captain, Jim Pop, steps in front of cameras. He doesn't hedge. He doesn't soften his words. He explains that Tina was kidnapped, that she was under control, that the language being used about her actions was wrong. He says plainly that, in the opinion of investigators, Tina was a victim for the entire 9 days of terror that ended with her return home. With that statement, the tone finally shifts. Not completely, but enough. Tina carries 2 regrets that never fully leave her. Getting into the car, and being forced to approach Dawn. She says it was a choice, but not one that belonged to her. She replays moments endlessly. Why didn't I run? Why didn't I refuse? Why didn't I do something else? Then she stops herself. She did what she could, and she lived. She says she hopes someone hears her truth and finds strength in it. That they walk away knowing survival doesn't look one way. That no one else gets to dictate who you are. Staying alive is a skill. People forget that. Years pass. Tina builds a life. She finds love. With it comes space to breathe. To be herself without explanation. Linda understands how close she came to not being there at all. She was the first to escape Wilder's control. And because she did, law enforcement finally understood what they were dealing with. Her 12-hour ordeal reshaped everything that followed. It changed her life, but it didn't erase her future. Dawn carries her own understanding. She thinks often about the women who didn't survive. She lives with intention now, believing she carries part of their story forward. Time doesn't erase what happened, she says, but it does make room to live alongside it. She becomes a mother, builds days filled with laughter and exhaustion and ordinary joy. Some days are heavy, others are light. That's the balance. All of their survival set something in motion. One decision after another. One refusal after another. Together, they ended a spree that had seemed unstoppable. In the end, it wasn't chance that stopped him. It was the women who stayed alive. They refused to disappear. They refused to be broken. And because of that, it ended. And that brings us to the end of tonight's stories. Thank you for spending part of your evening here with me. I truly appreciate you choosing Sleepcrime as a quiet place to end the day. Now it's time to leave these stories behind. Let your thoughts slow down, let the silence settle, and allow yourself to rest. Whatever happened in these cases belongs to the past. Tonight is simply a moment to breathe, relax, and ease into sleep. Take good care of yourself, and I hope you have a peaceful night. Until next time, good night.